will be posted after the fact. But yeah, I figured we would just get started. I'll just start and say welcome to everyone who's joining us today. Thanks for taking the time out, and thanks for being patient for yet another Zoom presentation. And thanks for making space in your day for this. We're pretty excited to be talking about Northwest Digital Heritage today. The three of us, Evan and Katie and I, and I'll introduce these folks in a minute, but we kind of had an overview presentation for today to talk about what Northwest Digital Heritage is, what we're trying to accomplish with our project, give you some background on how this cross-state and cross-agency partnership has evolved and has finally come about after many years of talking about it. And also we're gonna be providing a lot of good information, I think, on how organizations, especially in Oregon, how heritage organizations and libraries can participate and can think about sharing your local history and cultural materials with wider audiences. So those are kind of like our goals for today's presentation. Like I said, if you need to bail out early, or if you enjoy today's presentation and want to share with a colleague, it'll be recorded and we'll have it up. We'll have it up on the State Library of Oregon's website in a few days. But with that, I haven't introduced myself. My name is Ross Fuquay. I'm the Data and Digital Projects Consultant at the State Library of Oregon. I work for the Library Support and Development Services Division there at the State Library. And the other two folks who are presenting today are my awesome and amazing partners in this whole partnership. Katie Henry from the Oregon Heritage Commission, and Evan Robb from the Washington State Library. And I'll let them kind of share their titles and their what they do at their various agencies as we go. But just as kind of an orientation, I wanted everyone here to know, if you didn't know already, we have this basic website up for the project that we're going to be filling with kind of more information, more resources and details in the coming months and years. But this is kind of a good kind of portal to go to. It's northwestdigitalheritage.org. We have just some general information. We're going to be posting more resources about best practices around digital collections. We have a few there. We have a list here of our, well, this is our 3 partnering agencies. We are supported. I want to acknowledge the Washington State Library and the Oregon State Library of Oregon are both supported in this work through LSTA funding from the Institute of Museum and Library Services. But down here, you'll see a list of current participating organizations, places that are contributing their local content already through this network of ours. So that we're really excited to have such a robust list of organizations that we're able to launch this program with. We're also going to be posting some usage statistics on our DPLA hub. We can talk about that more in a little bit. And then down here, at the bottom, we have some contact info. If you want to reach out to us through the website, or Evan and Katie and my contact information is down at the bottom. But yeah, this is it. I encourage you to go to our website and keep checking back as we continue to populate it with some content and stuff. This link right here, Explore Now, I think this will just open to all of the current resources that have been harvested from our contributing organizations and are now also findable through the Digital Public Library of America. And as you can see, we have 86,000 records in there from organizations in Washington and Oregon, which is pretty exciting. Evan will talk kind of more about how this all works today, but with that, I think, Evan, did you wanna, we're going to you first, I believe, and do you wanna share a little bit about from your perspective?
Yeah, we're gonna go over to Katie first. I'm gonna share my screen here. So you should be seeing a slide presentation. And yeah, Katie, take it away.
Sure thing. So I'm Katie Henry. I'm the Oregon Heritage Commission coordinator. And the Oregon Heritage Commission is one of the partners in this adventure. And who we represent are the heritage organizations across Oregon, and we provide technical assistance to them. And obviously digitization has come up a lot with those groups. And, you know, I think early on, predating myself and Ross, you know, the commission and the State Library of Oregon realized how much crossover there was between libraries and museums and archives, especially when it comes to digitization. So this conversation has been going on for quite a long time, definitely over 10 years, probably maybe over 15 years. Maybe there's somebody on this call who's been in the conversation for that long through my predecessors and the commissioners. So if you wanna go ahead and hit the next slide, Evan, thank you. Some of the more recent, I'm gonna run down some of the more recent milestones that kind of led up to the launch and do a little bit of the backstory here so you know what kind of stuff we considered or conversations that were happening that led to the to Northwest Digital Heritage. In 2015, there was a Northwest Digital Collection Summit that included around 50 library, museum, and archive professionals who came together to discuss what collaborative digital projects were happening, leadership, metadata standards, and shared infrastructure for digital projects. And so we do have a link for that report, and I don't know if you want to actually just include the link in the chat too, might be good too for those that are interested, because it is kind of interesting reading about all the projects that were happening and still happening. And one of the recommendations that came out of it was considering the Washington Rural Heritage Project, which is managed by Evan Robb, shout out to him, with the Washington State Library as a model. So that's a model that's always kind of been along in the conversation, I think, since then. And Evan and Ross, if you hear any discrepancies with it, you recall too, let me know. This predates me a little bit here. So moving into 2016, these conversations continued alongside with work that Orbis Cascade Alliance was doing. That result through a couple LSTA grants that resulted, my computer's trying to update right now, which is not, no, I said no, don't do that. Sorry, guys. That resulted in creating best practices for metadata creation and providing training in a number of different topics related to digitization projects. And all of the documentation produced through those grants is available for use by any cultural heritage organization. So that was also happening in the 2016 to 2018 period. So with all these conversations came a lot of ideas from the three agencies and more that involved some statewide solutions such as regional hub ideas, shared equipment, inclusion in DPLA. All of these conversations were happening. And in 2018, the Oregon Heritage Commission decided to do a survey. Are you trying to skip out on my backstory, Evan? Trying to do a survey on where people are in digitization, what kind of barriers exist to digitizing their collections if they haven't yet, and just kind of throwing out these ideas of different solutions just to see if there was buy-in from those that are doing the work on the ground. And we had over 178 responses, which was really great, and a lot of data. It was a really huge survey, but it did give us a lot of information to work with and continue to work with as we kind of proceed forward with Northwest Digital Heritage. And again, Washington Rural Project was always in the mix there. And in 2019, the three agencies decided to pursue becoming a DPLA hub, which obviously took a lot of work in terms of getting agreements together, policies, experimenting with technology, and the application itself. But it paid off because in 2021, Northwest Digital Heritage was launched, and we're all pretty excited about it. And if you guys have anything to add to that timeline, please feel free to add there. Otherwise, I'll hand it over to you, Evan.
Thanks. No, I don't think I have anything else to add to that timeline. Let's see here. So yeah, my name's Evan Robb. I'm at the Washington State Library. I've been working with community digitization projects for about the last 10 years or so. And you'll hear us talk about metadata harvesting as it relates to the DPLA. And you may kind of wonder what that refers to. And it's somewhat akin to harvesting crops, agricultural harvesting, in terms of if we can use a metaphor. So here are some photos of combine harvester equipment in the wheatlands that exist in both Washington and Oregon. And those kind of revolutionized harvesting wheat and other grains. And at the top here, you see some of the actions that combine harvesters did or do. Not all of them. I realize they may not necessarily do, baling. Baling is a little bit different. May not fit into that. I'm not an ag specialist though. So those implements did some reaping, threshing, winnowing, bagging, baling, in some cases, shipping and selling happens separately. And as with the wheat harvests, we are harvesting or copying metadata records from digital collections throughout the region as part of this project. So we harvest or copy metadata that's produced by local heritage organizations, museums, historical societies, libraries, some nonprofit organizations that don't necessarily fit into those categories. And we clean it up. In some cases, we get rid of metadata or parts of records that we don't really need. Actually, we do that quite a bit. And then we standardize the metadata. We work with organizations to standardize the metadata as part of our workflow so that we can have nice, clean, uniform metadata and know what to expect. And it all fits into that DPLA portal or database in a way that works for end users. And then we package it up a little bit. We've transformed it into a different format, and we ship it to DPLA. Right now, we do that in pretty rudimentary manner. We just kind of send it to them. We drop it in a Amazon S3 bucket and say, here you go. Here's our latest harvest. And that gets shared out through the DPLA. So to participate in the DPLA, here are the minimum elements necessary for a record. So you need to have a title, and a title is for each and every digital item, digitized document, say a photo, a textual document, a recording, things of that nature. They require a title. We require a type. So an example of that would be image. Another type would field value would be text, sound, moving image. These all come from the Dublin Core Metadata Initiative type vocabulary. So if those don't exist in your digital collection, we can talk about adding those, or we can add them later on as part of our data cleaning process. There must be a provider, and that is basically the originating institution, the holding institution, the repository, whatever you want to call it. So that would be a, a library or a museum or another institution name. The DPLA requires a discrete standardized copyright statement for each and every item that you contribute a record for. So those rights statements are something we've been working on over the years. And so that requires a little bit of work on your end, determining the copyright statement of each and every item in your collection. And those should comply or adhere to either the rightstatements.org website. Take a look at it when you have a chance, rightstatements.org, or Creative Commons. And creativecommons.org has a number of, those are not so much right statements, so much as licenses for how you can use works. So there's a little bit of an overlap there. DPLA doesn't really differentiate between them. They just want to see either a rightstatements.org copyright label or a Creative Commons license on each and every item record that we send them. Then there should be a stable link that goes back to your digital collection so that end users can click through and get directed back to your digital collection. And we require the location of a thumbnail image whenever one is available for your collection. In some cases, thumbnails are not available through your digital collection system, and that's okay. In some cases, we have to kind of figure out a way to construct that thumbnail URL. It may not be present in your metadata, and that's something we do. So here's an example of one that comes from Content DM, which doesn't really provide that as part of their metadata. So we have to figure out the pattern that is required and construct it as part of our workflow. And then finally, there's an identifier. So OAI identifiers refer to the OAI PMH standard, which stands for Open Archives Initiative Protocol for Metadata Harvesting, which just means a way to share metadata. And when an OAI PMH service exists for your digital collections, this identifier tends to be included. If your system doesn't use an OAI PMH service, there are other ways that we can construct an identifier that is unique to each and every item. So those are the required elements. There's also quite a bit of optional metadata, and here are those elements. And some of these are preferred. We'd like to see a date whenever one exists. Subjects are really useful. A description, which would be like a free text narrative description or explanation. Creators, publishers, contributors. Contributor means more an individual or entity that contributed to the intellectual content of the work or creative content, not the person who may have donated it. So here are optional metadata elements. And the link here, which maybe we can share in the chat or share later, links out to our metadata requirements. And that provides some examples of what each of these might look like in terms of the metadata value. And we are also using best practices documents, 2 of them, for what each of these should look like. What comprises like a good spatial data or geographic data. What would be a good date that's acceptable and machine readable. And those best practices documents we're using are the Orbis Cascade Alliance's best practices for Dublin core metadata, and also right now the Washington Rural Heritage Guidelines. But to a certain extent, we're somewhat, non-prescriptive. We respect that each and every organization has specific ways that they are creating metadata for their digital collections. And we will work with you to see where we can kind of negotiate bringing your local practices in line with those DPLA requirements, especially as it relates to this optional metadata. So data aggregation and harvesting, a little bit more about that. So here is some Dublin core metadata that you might see as part of an OAI PMH metadata stream that comes from an OAI PMH service. So here's the DC, you'll see in these tag names, DC title, DC description, that means Dublin core. And here's a record for Herbert Nichols, the boy who shot the Asotin County Sheriff back in 1931. He was a troubled kid who had a rough start to life and was robbing a grocery store. And this record was really popular for a while online because people were colorizing photos of young Herbert Nichols, as I guess that's something folks do online, share their colorizing of historic photos and historic documents. So we kept getting all these hits, and I was like, why are we getting all these hits to this record? Anyway, so we harvest OAI PMH metadata. There are a number of tools to do that. Right now we're using a free open source tool called MarkEdit, created by Terry Reese, who used to be in Oregon. And we harvest this metadata before we start working on it. But we can also harvest other types of metadata. So Densho, which focuses on the Japanese American experience, especially as it relates to internment during World War II. Densho provides data in a format called JSON, and that's what this looks like. And it's just a different form of structured metadata. Now, we can also harvest, we're just learning about this right now. Ross and I are working on harvesting past perfect online metadata. There is a way that past perfect online, which I know a lot of smaller organizations, especially museums, use. They provide access to metadata in XML format, and that's great. So right now we are currently working on a workflow to harvest that data and move it on to the next stage. The next stage is data refinement. So we are using OpenRefine to first analyze metadata that we've harvested, and then get rid of extra metadata that the DPLA doesn't want to have included in records. That might be, all this local metadata that you use to manage your records, extra fields, local subject terms that don't really make sense in a large federated search environment, things of that sort. And so OpenRefine allows us to look at all of the values present in your records, find inconsistencies, offer feedback, fix inconsistencies. So if there are various forms of names, we can let you know that those inconsistencies exist, so that on a subsequent harvest, maybe that'll be fixed. We can add data that isn't present. For example, if you don't have any right statements, we can assign copyright not evaluated to all of your records. That's not preferred because we want there to be an actual useful right statement for end users when they finally come across your records. But sometimes we'll use that sort of as like a stopgap measure as you're working on your right statements. This image that you're seeing here actually shows a facet for the rights column in this particular set of records. And you'll see all of those different copyright URLs. So they refer to different right statements: copyright not evaluated. There's one for something that we've determined is in copyright, but we don't know who the rights holder is. They're unidentifiable or unlocatable. Things that are just in copyright, we know they are still protected by copyright. No known copyright, no copyright in the United States, which is kind of public domain, and then copyright undetermined. So yeah, those are different rights statements that were relevant to this particular collection, which was, again, from Asotin County in Southeast Washington. Once we've cleaned up your metadata and we've provided some feedback about your metadata or asked questions about it, we export this to just a generic XML format. So I have some of those tag names here. And then we do one last step, which is to transform that XML metadata into mods, which is yet another data standard from the Library of, I think it was originally developed by the Library of Congress. It's a little bit more of a rich element set than Dublin Core, a little bit more granular. So it allows us to be a little bit more specific about what we're calling different parts of your metadata. So, you know, we can provide a link to an image and say, this is the thumbnail, and this is a full-sized view of it, etc. And then that gets validated. We use Schematron to go through those XML files and make sure all of the data that should be there is there. And hopefully we don't miss anything. I'm still working on getting good at Schematron. And then we ship those records to DPLA. Right now we are shipping records to DPLA on a quarterly basis. We did one in the spring. Since we're a new hub, we skipped our summer quarter and of ingest to DPLA. And we're going to do another one in October, November. So I think in November, our next batch of records will show up in the DPLA. After we send them records, the DPLA has their own QA and feedback process. And so here's what that looks like. And they basically send this back to us in an email. And here's what we got for our spring ingest. There were only 4 records that failed, which was like, great. I was very excited about that. And it gave me some information about where I needed to fix things in that process. And then you finally have your records aggregated in DPLA. And just last night, I decided, well, what else might be out there in the DPLA Service Hub about Herbert Nichols, just from our Northwest Digital Heritage Network. So I did a quick search. You can do Boolean searching in DPLA, which is really great. So Herbert Nichols' last name has been spelled all these different ways. So you can search on all the different forms of name. And I discovered that Seattle Public Library had some content there that I hadn't even seen when we went through the whole harvesting process. So as you can see in the lower left-hand corner, Herbert Nichols was eventually paroled, and he went on to lead a life as a upstanding citizen who did not, commit any other crimes. So DPLA is really useful. I think we all see the value in search portals, federated search, bringing different material together so that end users can discover that material all in one place. And I'm going to pass it back to Katie to talk a little bit about how you can participate.
That was super interesting. Thanks for including that story about Herbert. As you can imagine, for some folks, I used to work in I used to be a one staff member of a historical society in Oregon, very small. And, there's a lot that we're doing. There's a lot that all of you are doing, and you may not be, you may not have this specialty of metadata and all of that backend stuff that Evan mentioned. And so that's where we come in. And it was really important to us to help bring folks along wherever they are in their project, whether they have wanted to start digitization, they just don't know what to do or what direction to go in, or they've done some digitization and they're considering making it accessible, or it already is accessible and they just want to make it even more accessible, or they have a really great established digitization project with online hosting and want to be included. So we're pretty firm believers in providing that technical assistance to all folks involved, and especially those with low capacity or no capacity or access to the technology to do it. So this is a very, very simplified flow chart made by me, who's the best person to do it in this group, because some of that stuff that Evan talked about, I learn something new every time I hear him talk about it. So it talks about some of the process, some of the questions we may ask you when you contact us through that form. I think is a really great place to start, first of all, that online form that Ross showed you on our website. So I guess I just want to say, if your collection isn't currently digitized, don't be shy, contact us. If your collection is digitized, but you don't have any online hosting, which means you can't have a way to access it online, which is a critical part of this, don't be shy, contact us. And a lot of what we're doing lately is investigating compatibility with the harvesting, which I really appreciated that agricultural relationship, because it's a better connection in my head than what I usually think of when you mention harvesting. So, don't be shy, contact us, and we're pretty dedicated to helping you wherever you are in the process, so that eventually it can lead to harvesting and then getting into the Northwest Digital Heritage. If you want to go to the next slide, Evan, please. There you go. So as I mentioned, we're and Ross or Evan, jump in on this too if you feel the need. Technical assistance is a big part of this hub. So we can help with project planning, guidance on equipment to use, online hosting, workflow, metadata standards, help with investigating compatibility of online hosting with harvesting. This is one that we've been doing a lot of lately. If you have a system that's already hosted online and want to know if it can be harvested, like he mentioned, the past perfect situation, which is a really big deal for a lot of museums here. Hosting option, we do have that as an option for those that don't have a way to host stuff online. Metadata cleanup, access to equipment depending on your region. We're starting to get some kits of shared equipment options together. And the region they land in, I'm imagining will be based on some of the conversations we have in the next couple months with folks. So again, definitely submit your inquiries or your interest on that form so we can get an idea of where interested folks are located and if we can get people together with shared equipment and et cetera and so forth. And then we are also investigating pilot project opportunities based on different situations that people are in, different places they are in their digital projects. And yeah, so if folks are up for that, that's an option too. Yep, you're perfect. Benefits. Certainly, getting those great stories out into the world is, I mean, that was a perfect story to use, and how you looked and found more information with the Seattle Public Library is a perfect example of the cool stuff that you can expand the stories that are in your collection. It's a way to do that. Increase accessibility of your organization's important collection so more people can access it. Help with creating digitization best practices for your organization. That's we have the Oregon Heritage Plan that has 4 goals, and best practices is one of them, and they certainly serve an organization to enact best practices across the board where they can and where their capacity allows. A hosting option for those that don't have access, and consideration for funded pilot projects. And of course, kind of the next step for us is to get together some committees, governance committees for Northwest Digital Heritage, and folks participating in the hub can certainly have the opportunity to join those and have a say in some of the stuff that we do. Oh, next slide, sorry. What's on the horizon? So we are always exploring ways to get grants to complete certain parts of the project, or if money allows, to create grants within our agencies is also another idea that we talk about a lot. So getting fund, it's important to us to obviously keep this free for folks. So getting funding, being creative about how we find that funding is a big thing we talk about a lot. Trainings and workshops. So we'll be having those. In fact, I think, surprise, Ross, we're going to have a workshop in the fall, right? So just keep your eye out for that and what comes down the pipeline for those. And if you want to suggest trainings and workshops, we should probably include a link to the listserv as well on here if people, and you can also contact us and ask for things as well. Equipment lending, I mentioned that already. The DPLA Local, I'm going to let Evan describe that in a minute, or Ross. And then a call for committee members will be coming down the pipeline, probably over the listserv or in different formats as well. I'll let you guys discuss anything else that's on the horizon or the things I can't really formulate into words.
Yeah, the DPLA Local is basically a sub portal of the Digital Public Library of America portal. So if you go to, for example, recollectionwisconsin.org, you'll see an example of that. And that is a search portal just for the state of Wisconsin that it searches just a portion of the DPLA. And it's a great way of kind of creating a regional destination for searching digital cultural heritage material. Florida is doing one too. They're called the Sunshine State Digital Network. So they're using a DPLA local search portal. And so we're looking into creating a DPLA local search portal for the Northwest, which I think would be really fantastic. And is part of the member network fees that we are paying DPLA. So we should pursue that.
And I guess if I were to add one more thing to what's on the horizon, it's you know, with all the interests that we've received and folks we've talked to, it's been a really good time to see where people are, and you know, it's going to take us time to get, so it's not going to happen immediately when folks contact us, because we're also trying to figure out where we can have the biggest impact at once, as well as helping folks along individually. So just hang in there with us, and know that everything is a process. But again, it also could depend on getting grants and other funding to hire people to do certain portions, et cetera, and so forth. So, you know, just want to put that out there. Be patient.
And it looks like in the chat, Ross has provided a link to the listserv. That's the Northwest Digital Projects listserv, which has existed for several years. And we're going to be using that listserv to share updates about the service hub. So please subscribe to that. You can subscribe to a digest version, but it's not used very much at this time. So you won't get swamped with more emails than you want. And I plan to send out a message to that with a reminder that our first month's worth of analytics has just been posted to our Northwest Digital Heritage website. So we have, as part of our DPLA membership, access to analytics. We can find out how many people are viewing items that they've searched on through DPLA, how many click-throughs. And the DPLA has an applications programming interface and API, which is used in various places, such as their digital exhibits. They have a number of primary source sets and digital exhibits that provide context to digitized material. For example, they just created one about Black women's suffrage movement. I think that was last year. And we are already getting click-throughs from searches in that exhibit to some content from our Northwest Digital Heritage Service Hub. And so that's really exciting to see that. That exhibit was created last year, but because of the DPLA search API, we're getting traffic from that exhibit into our new content. And I haven't really been able to dig down deeper into seeing like exactly where that's coming from, but I'm going to see if I can. So those analytics are all the way down to the provider level. So you would be able to tell if you were a providing institution, how many click-throughs you were actually getting to your content from the DPLA.
Well, thanks, Evan and Katie, for for this today, and we have about 20 minutes still for folks. If you want to ask questions or put questions in the chat. I know that we kind of started at the we started at like the 10-foot level today. And I want to thank Evan for all of the detail and transparency he provided in the DPLA harvesting process. And I think Katie, you did a great job of like kind of bringing it out, zooming out a little bit more, especially for the goals that we have for this effort down in Oregon. Washington has such a great kind of established program now with the Washington Rural Heritage Project and their metadata remediation efforts that Evan was leading, or is still leading, I believe. And we have so many great like models that we can kind of beg, borrow, or steal from Washington, that I'm really excited about working with libraries and organizations down here in Oregon to apply some of that work. And we've been really talking from the start, the three of us, but especially Katie and I, about how we can really meet the needs of the broadest array of Oregon organizations. And by that, I mean the diversity of collections and what the history being presented, but also just where you're at as an organization and where you're looking to take your collections in the digital realm. But so I know that we may have zoomed in pretty fast in the beginning, but if folks have questions, and I'm seeing a couple of questions in the chat, I'll try to address here in a second. But if folks have like real, kind of big picture, broad level questions, like we are totally welcome to that. I know we've thrown a lot of info at you, a lot of details. So let's see. Just gonna look at the chat for a little bit. Okay, Nicole asks, is it enough for an institution to be Oregon or Washington based? Or does the subject matter of our digital content need to be Pacific Northwest related? That is a good question. Actually, I'm not sure I've really given that particular question or that scenario a whole lot of thought.
Do you mind, Ross, if I
No,
bring
go
something
for it.
up for consideration? I think that's part of what you brought up, Ross, is what's the end game? And so if you want to let us know kind of what the content is, if you want to go submit on the form or contact us after, it might be totally fine, or there might be a more appropriate place to contact too that could relate to your content better also. It's kind of like when somebody gives you an object as a museum, are you the best place, or who's the best place for that object to go to is what just jumped in my head. I don't know if Evan or Ross has a different response to that.
I tend to think that if it is an item that's been digitized and you can make it resolve to a digital object in a digital repository, then it doesn't matter if it is specifically Pacific Northwest related. Plenty of the other institutions in DPLA have material, that is, focused on topics and places from throughout the globe. So I don't think it necessarily needs to be Pacific Northwest related, no. But that's just my opinion.
But yeah, we would love to know more, Nicole. So if you want to reach out, that would be awesome. Judy G, you've got a great question from Dayton. I'm assuming Dayton, Oregon. So
Hi,
is the
Judy.
city, do you know Judy?
I think I know Judy. I think I know Judy.
I'll read this for the sake of the recording, but the question is, the city owns a bunch of historic photos. Some some of which they have online on the city's website. Question, like three-part questions. Platform. Question 2, how do you convince the city that it would be good to participate in your program? Ooh, great question. And question 3, is a hosting platform something that costs money? Well, I can answer question 3 right away and say no. There are free options, there are good free options. And there are several options that we could help you kind of explore as far as collection hosting. I have not seen the City of Dayton, Oregon's website, but I'm gonna take a wild stab and put my neck out and say the city website is probably not the best place long term for heritage materials to be discovered. I think I'll leave my response to that question there. But yeah, Evan or Katie, do you have the question in the middle about working with the city to convince them about participation? If you guys have any insights, that'd be great.
Well, I mean, oh, go ahead, Evan.
I would just say that a certain amount of digital preservation occurs as a result of participation in this program. Each state is handling digital preservation separately. So in Washington, we use a digital archive service to preserve master files that have been digitized by our partners. And so that involves, monthly fixity checks. They actually take like a thumbnail and then in the way of a checksum, or a thumbprint in the way of a checksum of each file, and check it every month to make sure it hasn't changed. And it's a valid data file, and that you're not going to get that necessarily in just regular web hosting, at least not for a large master file. So there's a certain amount of digital preservation that occurs. And by participating in a project like this, your material does appear alongside other material that's related and can be used more easily by end users who are using the material for research in educational settings, etc. And you become part of a larger network of cultural heritage institutions pursuing the same goals. So I think it's worthwhile for a small city to participate.
Right, and this is this question is very important, and it's one that speaks to the value of heritage and the value of your community's stories, which is something we talk a lot about with the Oregon Heritage Commission, and it's actually a good opportunity, I think, for one of our vehicles that we use to provide those kind of statements to get folks on board or recognize the value in participating in the hub. For example, if you see the value, Judy, and you want to approach the city, it'd be great for you to have those statements to take in with you, and what that would mean to the town. And I think that's an opportunity for us to create something like that. We've done that before for other things, like why it's good to attend a conference and how to convince your boss to attend the Oregon Heritage Conference and things like that. So thank you for bringing that up. And I think it's a good opportunity for us to provide something for you on that in the future, or come talk at a city council meeting too.
Awesome. Liz Paulus, hi Liz. Thanks for joining us. Yeah, Liz has a great question about existing digital collections that are using, in their case, Content DM, which we didn't really talk about hosting platforms and content repositories very much today, but Content DM is kind of a long-standing flagship repository for digital collections. It's OAI PMH compliant, so that's a metadata harvesting protocol as designated by the Open Archives Initiative, which is one of the main ways that Evan is able to leverage metadata from these existing collections. So so your question, Liz, is about priorities, but also suggestions on how to advocate for DPLA connections. Well, we would love to work with basically any non-Orbis Cascade Alliance member organizations and libraries in the Northwest as your service hub for your existing collections. So I would say let's definitely chat soon about that. In terms of prioritizing our work, I will be completely upfront and say that that's especially in Oregon, I think that's a growing big question that Katie and I have, and I think we already have some good pathways forward for that. But we're also, I think, as Katie mentioned, we're looking at putting a call out for some advisory committee folks to help us in kind of governance and just general advisory perspectives for the Northwest Digital Heritage. So we'll be putting a call out, I think, across Oregon and Washington. And I'm hoping that that kind of body of folks can help us at least in Oregon, kind of figure out some of those priorities. I know that I will say that we have a really awesome 3-year strategic plan for my agency right now at the State Library of Oregon. I think we're about a year into it already. But this effort in supporting digital collections in Oregon and specifically for Oregon libraries is called out specifically in that plan. And we're also very interested in really addressing equity in all of our efforts right now at our agency. So that's kind of the general lens that my agency's kind of coming at this with right now. But anyway, hopefully that was a long-winded answer to your question, but hopefully that answers some of it. But we just should definitely talk more soon, Liz. And Virginia Bruce is asking actually about a really great question, Virginia, about the actual process of scanning images and other like transparencies in photos and things like that. I might actually bat this question to Evan, if you don't mind, Evan. But go ahead.
The advice I generally give for material that may be scratched or damaged is when you digitize or scan the material, you should capture a high quality archival TIFF version of a photo and not touch it. The scan should, accurately depict the original item. But then you want to create an access or web version of your scan. And if you want to clean that up by getting rid of dust, scratches, tears, my perspective is it's okay to do that if that fits with your approach to providing access to these materials. But other people feel differently. So I think that's sort of a local decision you should make. And if you do make any changes, even to an access version, you should make a note of that in your metadata. Repaired scratches, just so the end user knows that the original may have those issues in terms of its condition. That can be really fun and also time consuming to repair old digitized versions of old photos.
Yeah, thank you, Evan. And I think Evan, you make a great point about that preservation copy that once you capture the most realistic representation of the object you're scanning, you always have that file to go back to later. Like say you did some cleanup work and 3 years from now you decided, I don't like that work. I don't like the work that I did. I want to go back to the original scan. So yeah. Anyway,
and getting back to Liz's question, if an organization wants to potentially participate in the DPLA, we're happy to create a set of recommendations for your metadata. So if you had a specific digital collection you were considering, we could analyze the metadata and just provide some recommendations for what you need to do to get that metadata up to the DPLA standard. We did that for a couple of years as part of our metadata cleanup grants here in Washington. And so that went pretty well. So get in touch with us and let us know, and we're happy to do that.
Yeah, thank you, Evan. And Ed Vandehey asks about roughly how many hours per week would be desired to clean up metadata of holdings scanned over the last 10 years. All volunteer organization, no employees, so we would have to go find volunteers. Yeah, that sounds like a very common, I think, scenario that you're describing, Ed. Evan can definitely provide some perspective on metadata cleanup too, but my initial answer would say it totally depends on kind of the state of your metadata overall and how uniform or not uniform that metadata has been created over the years. We do have a lot of tools that we can help kind of do like batch cleanup, kind of field by field if you've used certain fields more or less consistently over that time period. From my opinion, that those types of cleaning up things like place names, personal names for like creators, subject headings, those can really kind of instantly improve just the general accessibility of a collection. But Evan, did you want to Katie, do you want to chime in?
I'm sure Evan can talk about more the hours per week, but I just wanted, for consideration, I just want to throw out there, Ed, that again, if you let us know that GFO, that's genealogical form of Oregon, is that right? Wants to be a part of DPLA, but it's this metadata cleanup that may take a while. If we have a bunch of organizations that are at kind of the same place you are in terms of metadata cleanup, we can consider that when we're trying to find funding resources and find people, find the funds to fund that project, for whether it's hiring interns or hiring people to do it. Those are all things we've kicked around. So certainly just kind of let us know your situation, either via the form or contacting us, and we can always kind of gather all that information from the organizations that have expressed interest and see where we can get the biggest bang for our buck in terms of going for money and funding and getting people into this hub. Sorry.
No, thanks for that, Katie. And just in the interest of time, we're at the hour, but so I'm gonna pause our recording for now, but I'm happy to stick around for a little bit longer if folks have questions. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. This has been kind of a great first experience for the three of our agencies to be promoting this new partnership. So thanks for sharing in our enthusiasm and for being here. And yeah, please reach out to us either through email or our contact form. So with that, I will pause the recording.